The lobby door was 40 feet away. They made her walk 400. My loves, I stood behind a marble desk in Manhattan for 40 years. I know exactly which door they sent her through, and I know exactly who was watching when she came back in. Sienna Carter is 29. Black. A fine art appraiser. Korean ceramics. The best pair of hands her firm has. She spent that whole day 40 floors up, alone with a Joseon moon jar worth $3.1 million, wearing a paper pass that said vendor half an inch from her own badge. At 7:40 that evening, she crossed the marble lobby. Evelyn Whitmore was waiting. Pearl tweed, diamond earrings, a phone already dialing the police, and 2 security men who suddenly could not move. So Sienna reached out and grabbed the sleeve of a stranger. Seo Tae-hyun, 6'4", a black dragon inked up the left side of his neck, disappearing behind his ear. The man they call the Quiet One. She called him her husband. Aigu. He didn't correct her. He put his arm around her waist and had Evelyn's lease torn to pieces on the spot. 10 minutes to empty the apartment. But listen to me, darling. Men like that don't do favors. They collect. And what he asked for in that elevator? Stay with me. You'll want to be sitting down for this one. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Sienna Carter made it 4 steps into the lobby of the Ashworth before the concierge raised one finger without raising his eyes. She stopped on the marble with her credentials already fanned in her hand. Firm badge, engagement letter, photo ID, arranged the way you hold a boarding pass at a gate that keeps moving. Raymond Osgood finished a line in his leather ledger and capped the pen. He read her badge slowly, a man studying a menu in a restaurant he had already decided against. Calloway and Pierce, she said, fine art appraisal. I'm scheduled at Unit 4001 for 8 o'clock. Vendors use the service entrance. I'm not a vendor. I'm a consultant, engaged by the leaseholder. Raymond turned a laminated card that lived beside the house phone and tapped it twice. House rules, item 9, printed small enough to require good faith. Around the side, he said. Past the loading dock, ring twice. My appointment is in 6 minutes. Then you'll want to walk quickly, miss. The walk around the block took 4 of the 6. The gray steel door on the 68th Street side sat between a dumpster and a rolling rack of dry cleaning in plastic. She rang twice. The camera over the door considered her at length. Then the door opened from the inside, and there stood Raymond, who had traveled 40 feet in order to make her travel 400. The vendor log wanted her time in, her company, her supervisor's phone number, and her license plate. In the box for the plate, she wrote, Subway. Raymond read the word upside down, then righted the clipboard and read it again, giving it the attention of a man auditing a confession. He picked up the service phone next, dialed 3 digits, and let it ring against his ear while he watched her over the receiver. Verifying, he said, to no one in particular. Whoever was meant to answer never did. He set the phone down as though the silence itself had cleared her, and made a note of that too. Bag on the counter, please. She set the leather bag on the counter and opened it herself, wide, before he could put his fingers in it. Calipers in a padded roll, a UV lamp, a loupe, cotton gloves in a zip sleeve, white as a promise. He looked longer than the bag deserved, then printed a paper day pass, vendor, in letters sized for reading across a ballroom, and clipped it to her lapel himself, half an inch from the badge of the firm that had sent her. It hung crooked. Freight elevator only. Service corridor only. He held the inner door for her, which somehow made it worse. Residents pay for the lobby, miss. That's what the lobby is for. She straightened the pass in the freight car's steel reflection, alone between moving blankets that smelled of cardboard and lemon polish, and rode 40 floors up with her chin level. Posture is free. It was the one thing in that building that was. A porter unlocked 4001, pointed at the crate, and left her with the smell of fresh paint. The apartment was empty with the special emptiness of money. One folding table. No shades on windows that gave the whole green length of Central Park. The oak floors carried no ghost marks of sofas or beds. No scuffs. No life. Nobody had ever lived here. The unit was a parking space for objects. She photographed the room corner to corner before touching anything, per protocol. Then the paperwork sleeve taped to the crate. Her firm's work order, an insurance schedule, a lease cover sheet. Lessee, Hyacinth Holdings, LLC. No human name on any page of it. She photographed that too, twice. The second shot was for her own files. The crate was museum grade, stenciled in English and Korean. She cut the strapping, walked the panels off one at a time, unfolded the foam in the order the packers had intended, and lifted away a wrapping of raw silk. The moon jar stood 18 inches tall, white as milk standing in shadow, two thrown hemispheres joined at the waist by a potter 300 years dead. The join sat a little proud. The shoulders leaned a degree off true. That was correct. Moon jars are made in halves, and the perfect ones are the lies. She pulled on the cotton gloves and went to work. Raking light along the glaze found an old web of crackle and nothing fresh riding over it. In the windowless closet with the door shut, the UV lamp swept the surface and came back empty. No overpaint fluorescing, no filled chip, no resin ghosting under the foot. She took the calipers to the mouth, the belly, the base, and logged every figure into the tablet in the firm's dry little fields. She weighed it. She turned it in her hands, the slow, listening way a doctor turns a wrist. The foot ring wore its centuries honestly, softened by floors and hands and time, and not by a weekend of sandpaper. She wrote that down in more careful words. Then she circled the jar once on her knees and once standing, and photographed it against gray card from 8 angles. Korean ceramics were her lane at Callaway and Pierce, the reason the firm had taken on a 29-year-old at all, and the lane demanded the full circuit every time, even when the object had already told her the truth. The insurance schedule gave the number she already knew from the work order. 1 moon jar, Joseon Dynasty, 18th century, $3.1 million. The schedule stated it as calmly as a phone number. At 10:15, her phone lit against the folding table. Brightwater Care Center. She peeled off one glove and answered on her knees beside the crate. Miss Carter? It's the billing office, about your grandmother's account. The auto-pay bounced. I saw it this morning. On the 1st, yes. There is a 10-day grace period, and after that the room can't be. Friday, she said. I'm paid Friday, and it clears the same hour. She keeps the room. A pause with paperwork in it. She keeps the room, Miss Carter. Thank you. And the window bed, she's still by the window? Still by the window. She stayed on her knees a moment after the call ended, one glove in her fist. The lock screen glowed up at her grandmother at 80, laughing under a church hat, holding Sienna's diploma sideways. 6 decades of other women's hemlines had paid for that paper. The room by the window took $4,000 a month to pay it back. Above the message thread sat the calendar banner she had spent all week swiping away. Probationary review, 60 days. She turned the phone face down and picked up the loop. At 1 o'clock she ate a granola bar standing at the window, watching the park do nothing expensive, and was back on her knees by 4 minutes past. The provenance packet came out of the sleeve in the afternoon. A bill of sale from a soul dealer, an auction record, Paris, a consignment agreement with a signature like a lie detector line, and at the bottom, in a plastic sheet of its own, the export certificate, dated March 1962, typed in 2 languages, stamped at the port of departure. The ministry seal was embossed into the paper, a flower inside 2 rings. She ran a fingertip across it and stopped. A genuine press bites deepest at the center and shallows toward the rim. This one bit deepest at the rim. She tilted the page against the window light and counted the petals of the rose of Sharon at the seal's heart. 11. She opened the firm's reference scans on the tablet. 3 certificates, same ministry, same decade, and counted those. 12, 12, 12. She checked a 4th time with the page rotated, because the fastest way to end a career is to be sure too early. The count held. 11 petals on a 12-petal seal on a certificate old enough to have outlived everyone who could explain it. Sienna set the page down and breathed out through her nose, slow, a habit from rooms where reactions get expensive. The jar was right. She would have staked her license on the jar. The paper that let the jar out of Korea was wrong, and a wrong export paper on a right object is not a smaller problem than a fake. It is a bigger one, with older names attached. Her thumbs went to the phone, to Hale, her supervisor. Jar authenticates clean. Export cert doesn't. The seal is off. I need 48 hours on provenance before I sign anything. The reply bubbles rose, died, rose again. At 4:52, Hyacinth is expecting a signed report tonight. Then they can't have tonight, she typed. They can have the truth in 48 hours. The bubbles returned once more and vanished. A full minute later, 3 words arrived. We'll talk Monday, no question mark. Hale saved his punctuation for clients. The calendar banner sat right above the thread while she read them. 60 days. She put the phone away and finished the job she'd been sent to do. Condition report complete, certification line blank. A hold note entered into the file in language built to survive lawyers. Authentication of object consistent. Export documentation discrepancy. Verification required prior to certification. Twice her stylus drifted down toward the signature line, and twice she scrolled back up to the photograph of the seal instead. The 3rd time, she closed the file. She saved it as a draft, and the draft signed nothing and promised nothing. Then she wrapped the jar in its silk, rebuilt the foam in reverse, walked the panels back into place, and ran custody tape across every seam of the crate. On the tape itself, across each join, she signed, S. Carter. She photographed every signature. Whatever happened to this crate from now on would have to happen through her name. It was 7:31 when she rang down for the porter. He arrived with his phone already at his ear and listened to it longer than any message needed, his eyes settling somewhere beside her shoulder. Freight car's down for the night, he said. You'll have to go out through the lobby. The lobby at 7:40 was lit like a jewelry case, and Evelyn Whitmore rose from the settee as if she had been holding the pose since lunch. Pearl tweed, a platinum bob polished to the jaw, a Hermes bag riding her forearm like a small shield. She planted herself on the marble between Sienna and the doors with the precision of a woman who has rehearsed the geometry. Stop right there. Sienna adjusted her line toward the doors. Evelyn moved with her, heels ringing. You have been inside this building since morning. She pitched it for the room, and the room obliged. By the elevator bank, a couple in gym clothes stopped pretending to wait. In an empty unit. Carrying that. I'm a consultant engaged by the leaseholder of 4001. Good night. There is no leaseholder of 4001. That unit has stood empty for 2 years. Everyone on this side of the building knows it. Evelyn's eyes did a slow itemization, shoes to hair, and arrived back unimpressed. Open the bag. No. The word landed and spread rings. Evelyn's chin found a higher angle. She reached out and flicked the paper day pass on Sienna's lapel with one lacquered nail, and the pass skated off across the marble. Anyone can print one of these. Raymond. Did you let this person upstairs? Raymond stood at the desk in his overcoat, caught halfway between his shift and his conscience. She signed the vendor log, he said. and found something that needed reading in the ledger. Two security men in gray stood by the male alcove. One touched his earpiece, listened to something, angled a shoulder away, and became architecture. The other studied the floor as if the marble might be counterfeit. Evelyn rotated toward the couple by the elevators like a lighthouse. You saw her come out of the service corridor. You all saw it. The couple discovered urgent business on the man's phone. It changed nothing in her posture. Witnesses were a garnish. She already had her phone out. Speaker on. Theatrical. Yes. I need officers at the Ashworth, 68th and 5th. A trespasser. A woman has spent the entire day in a unit that is supposed to be empty, and now she is trying to leave with a bag she refuses to open. The pause stretched, and Evelyn let it, smiling faintly at Sienna over the phone. You'll know her when you see her. People who use service doors, dear, generally know why. The operator's voice buzzed into the hush. Officers were on the way. Sienna's thumb found the strap of her bag and held it. She ran the arithmetic without moving her face. A searched kit meant questions of custody on a $3 million object she alone had sealed. A police report meant a phone call to Hale. A phone call to Hale, 60 days out from review, meant Brightwater, meant the room, meant her grandmother's hands folded in some cheaper building's fluorescent light. The math finished itself and offered her nothing at all. That was when the doors turned and the night came in wearing charcoal. 4 men, 3 in black, built for standing near exits. The 4th was 6'4" and crossed the lobby as if the building belonged to him, which, as it happened, it did. A forest green shirt, open at the collar, under midnight wool. A long black coat over one arm, a platinum watch that threw a single clean flash beneath the chandeliers. And ink, a dragon in brushstroke climbing from the left collarbone up the side of his neck, slipping behind the ear, half hidden by the collar, and unbothered about the half that wasn't. Beside him moved an older man with a graying flat top, a boxer's finished face, a small vertical scar on the chin, and a clear coil of wire behind one ear. The lobby recognized him before Sienna did. Raymond straightened off the desk by 2 vertebrae. The gym couple drifted a step closer to the wall. Even the chandeliers seemed to burn more carefully. Only Evelyn, mid-performance, missed it. Their line of travel would pass within a yard of her. The phone was still buzzing dispatch language into the room. Evelyn was smiling at it. Sienna looked at the blocked doors, and Evelyn shifted her weight to keep them blocked. She looked at Raymond, who had located a second thing to read. She looked at the 2 men who had turned into columns, at the revolving door beyond them, at 8 subway stops between this marble and a bed she still had to pay for by Friday. Then a charcoal sleeve swung into reach. She ran the numbers one last time, got the same answer, and reached. Her fingers closed on the wool. The older man came around fast for his size and stopped mid-step because the tall one had lifted 2 fingers without breaking stride, palm down. Nwadwo, Taehyun said. Quiet, in Korean, leave it. The lobby went still enough to hear the speakerphone breathe. You're late, Sienna said, loud enough for the operator, in the tone of a woman airing an old complaint. Then, the next word, chosen the way you grab a railing on a stair that gives, husband. 3 seconds passed at the price of a year apiece. His eyes went from her hand on his sleeve, to her face, to Evelyn's phone, and something behind them completed its own quiet calculation. Then his arm came around her waist, unhurried, certain, a fact settling into place. Traffic, he said. Evelyn's smile developed a fault line. The pearls moved with her swallow. This woman has been trespassing all day in an empty, my building, he said. You called the police on my wife, in my building. Raymond's ledger closed with the sound of a small door. Whatever he knew about who owned the Ashworth arrived on his face all at once and drained it to the color of the desk. The operator asked if anyone was still there. Evelyn stared at her phone as if it had bitten her, and ended the call with a thumbnail. "There was no way for me to know," she said, recalibrating toward gracious and missing by a lobby's width. She came through the service entrance. She refused to open her bag. "One has to be careful. The things that happen in this city." "Say it again," he said. "I beg your pardon?" "What you told the operator. You'll know her when you see her." He let it sit on the marble between them. "Say it to me." Evelyn's mouth opened. Her eyes went to the gym couple, to Raymond, to the columns in gray, hunting for the room that had been hers 30 seconds ago. The room had moved. It was standing next to him now. He turned his head an inch toward the older man. "Do-yoon, gay-axio." Do-yoon murmured into his cuff, and the Ashworth produced a night manager at a run, folder carried in both hands like something warm. 90 seconds, door to marble. Money runs fastest downhill. Tae-hyun read the cover page at his own pace. Whitmore, 2301. Renewed in March. He looked at her over the folder's edge. 11 years. 11 wonderful years, Evelyn said. And I don't believe we've ever been properly. He tore the lease lengthwise. He squared the halves with a small tap against his wrist, tore them again, and opened his hand. 4 pieces seesawed down onto the marble between her Chanel toes. The laugh Evelyn sent ahead of her came back alone. "You can't do that. I have rights. My attorney will have you in front of a judge by 10 minutes, he said. "Carry what matters. The lawyers can argue over the rest of it." Do-yoon crouched, gathered the 4 pieces off the floor, and slid them into a clear sleeve inside his jacket. Careful, deliberate, the way evidence gets bagged. 10. Evelyn's voice went hunting through its registers. Found a laugh, lost it, found something higher. "Do you have any idea who my friends are? Who I am?" "Raymond," she said, when the silence held, and it came out an octave off. "Raymond, tell him who I am." Raymond gave the ledger his complete attention. "The woman who used my lobby to hold a trial." He was already turning, and the arm at Sienna's waist turned her with him, gently, as a dance turns. "That is not what the lobby is for." Behind them her voice climbed and cracked. "Attorney, friends, people who will hear about this." And then it stopped being words. What a certain kind of pride sounds like when it finally breaks is not a scream. It is smaller than that, and wetter, and the whole lobby heard it anyway. The private elevator stood beyond the male alcove behind a brass door with no call button in sight. Do-yoon touched a fob to the plate and held the door with a flat palm. Sienna went in because the arm at her waist made refusal a performance she could no longer afford. The word wife was already on a 911 recording. In her own voice, in front of a room of witnesses she'd counted herself. "I'll take the street exit," she said, low, to the green collar at her eye level. "Thank you. Truly, I'll just..." In the dark brass of the interior, she caught the two of them side by side, a crooked paper pass that said vendor, and a platinum watch worth more than her year. His arm stayed where it was. The doors met. Evelyn Whitmore's crying stopped as cleanly as a needle lifted off a record. The car rose. She had never told him her name, and he hadn't asked. And the panel gleaming under his hand had no button marked lobby at all. The elevator climbed 30 floors before Tae-hyun turned a small brass key beneath the panel. The car slowed, sighed, and hung there between floors, humming to itself. He stepped back, took his arm from her waist, and folded his hands behind him like a man opening a meeting. Do-yoon had stayed below, standing over Evelyn Whitmore's 10 minutes with a stopwatch face. "Se-hyun," he said, "a wife should know her husband's name." She kept her spine where 6 years of appraisal rooms had taught her to keep it. "Sienna Carter." "Miss Carter." He let the name settle between them. 20 minutes ago, you used my name in front of my men, in my building, on a recorded emergency line." He studied her the way she studied porcelain, patiently, and for cracks. Where I come from, that is not a rescue. That is a contract. You could have denied me. I could have. The floor indicator glowed on no number at all. 2 officers would have driven you somewhere with worse lighting, and by morning, every man in Seoul who watches me would know that a stranger wore my name in my own lobby, and that I let her. He tilted his head 1 degree. Men in my world have lost houses over smaller sentences. Then unsay it. Words are not rings, Miss Carter. A ring comes off. It was 1 word, under duress. It was my name, on a government recording, in your voice. He said it without heat, the way a man reads a balance. There are people who transcribe those calls for a living, and people who pay the people who transcribe them. By Monday, the sentence exists in 3 languages. Duress is not a solvent, Miss Carter. Nothing dissolves it now but the truth, or a better story. She caught herself measuring the cab. Brass, walnut, custom joinery, a box worth more than her annual salary, and stopped, because appraising the trap was not the same as leaving it. What do you want? 5 days. He turned the key, and the car resumed its climb. Upstairs, I'll tell you what they buy. I haven't agreed to anything. You agreed in the lobby. The doors opened onto a private vestibule, and past it a wall of glass with the whole dark park pinned behind it. Weather was assembling out over the river, stacking itself in slow gray tiers. The apartment ran on and on. Stone, walnut, silence of the kind kept by invisible staff, and at the far end, a corridor of lit cases glowed like a museum after closing. She counted 14 cases from the doorway. Celadon in one, white porcelain in another. Her fingers itched for gloves, which annoyed her, and she filed the feeling away for later. Tae-hyun stopped at the glass and spoke to the city instead of to her. On Tuesday, a plane lands from Seoul. 7 elders of Seohan, the house my family built, with my grandfather at the head of them. They are coming to decide whether I inherit. Inherit what, exactly? Everything with our name under it, and several things without. He turned around. My grandfather is 71. He believes a man who cannot keep a household cannot be trusted with a house. There are men near his ear who repeat that sentence every time my name comes up. For 2 years they have called this city my exile. A pause. As of tonight, there is a police recording of a wife I have never once mentioned. So either you produce a wife, she said, or you explain to 7 old men why a stranger wore your name. You have a gift for contracts. And if I walk out instead, the door is behind you. The elevator works. He crossed to the console and poured 2 glasses of water, set one within her reach, and left it entirely up to her. But you would be walking out as the woman on that recording, suspended by morning, unsigned report, overruled by someone hungrier, and a certain resident downstairs swearing to a judge that you broke into an empty unit. Or you can walk out on Wednesday as the woman who was never anything but respectable. I'm offering you the better story, too. Her phone buzzed against her hip. It buzzed again, in the pattern the firm reserved for official mail. She read the screen once, then a second time, slower. Administrative leave, effective immediately, pending review of a client complaint and a police incident at a client site. Human Resources had sent it at 8:19 on a Thursday night. Hale was copied and silent. The complaint itself carried a stamp. Filed 8:02 p.m., 22 minutes after the officers were called. Filed by the client whose lease had no human name on it. Somebody worked fast. Somebody worked late. She set the phone face down on the console. Whatever she had walked in here holding, she held less of it now. Both of them knew it. She straightened anyway. 5 days, she said. Here are my terms. Something moved at the corner of his mouth and declined to become a smile. Go on. 5 days, ending when the delegation leaves. No extensions, no encores. Agreed. A separate room, with a door that locks from my side of it. There are 6. Take the one with the best light. My career comes back, not as a favor, as a correction. I'm reinstated by Friday noon, the complaint is withdrawn, and my report stays exactly as I wrote it. I certify nothing about that jar until its paperwork survives verification. She held one beat, and my paycheck clears tomorrow, because someone I love eats on the 1st of the month, whether or not I've had an interesting week. He considered her for a long moment, the way men consider a price they intend to pay. You were suspended 11 minutes ago, and you're dictating terms. You need a wife by Tuesday. I've been one for an hour, and you already can't afford to lose me. This time, the smile arrived, brief as a signature. Calloway and Pierce has wanted Seohan's insurance work for years. In the morning, they'll remember what you're worth. The complaint will withdraw itself. He stepped over and stood her phone upright again, screen toward her, a small courtesy with teeth in it. Now mine. In public, you follow my lead. You wear the ring, you let the staff serve you, and you flinch at nothing. Elders watch a wife the way customs watches luggage. In private, this floor is yours, except the study, and whatever you see in this house stays in this house. I've kept richer men's secrets for 6 years. It's called client confidentiality. Not like ours. He put out his hand. She took it. The grip was brief, dry, final. The handshake of a man closing on property. Then he walked her down the corridor of cases, past bowls the color of weather and jars that had outlived their dynasties, and stopped without ceremony. There is also work, if you want it. Paid work. The elders will inspect the collection. It is the spine of this family, older than any of the business. I want a condition report before their plane lands. She looked down the row of lit glass and felt the evening rearrange itself into something she knew how to survive. Standard rate, invoiced. Of course, Mrs. CO. Carter, she said. When no one is watching, it's Carter. The east room had good light and a steel bolt, and the bolt seated with a clean sound, she made it repeat twice. She set her shoes where she could step into them in the dark, slid the tablet with the unsigned draft under the second pillow, and slept the way she slept in strange cities, lightly and on schedule. In the morning, Do-yoon set a small lacquered box beside her coffee. Inside sat a platinum band, plain as a paperclip and polished like an heirloom. It fit. She decided against asking how they knew her size. She slid it on herself before anyone could reach for her hand. Work uniform, she said, to the room at large. I've worn a badge for 6 years. This one is heavier. The staff materialized with the daylight. A housekeeper who refilled her cup from the left without being seen arriving. A cook who asked in careful English how Mrs. CO took her eggs. Sienna took the service the way the terms required. Spine easy, thank you small, flinching at nothing. By the second refill, the housekeeper had stopped watching her hands, which meant the first inspection had been passed, and the first report would travel. Buildings like this ran on 2 circulatory systems, and only one of them carried water. Do-yoon gave his morning report across the marble island, in the tone of a man reading tide tables. The officers had logged Thursday as a nuisance call. No report filed. Mrs. Whitmore's attorneys had bought her a 30-day stay on paper, and she was already telling anyone with ears that the building had been seized by criminals. Tae-hyun stirred his coffee once. Let the lawyers eat. At 8:40, he took her down through the main lobby on his arm. At the exact hour the marble was busiest. Raymond Osgood stood at the desk and performed the fastest theology of his career. "Good morning, Mr. CO," he said, and then, with the care of a man diffusing something, "Mrs. CO." Overnight, the marble had learned her a new name, and it pronounced this one carefully. The car at the curb took them 4 blocks and brought them back. The errand was invented. The audience was not. At 9:41, her phone lit with hail. Suspension rescinded. Administrative error, draft stands. She read the word error twice. In 6 years, she had never known the firm to admit to one. At 12:02, the Brightwater autopay cleared on the second attempt, and $4,000 bought another month of the bed by the window. Sienna gave that 10 full seconds, standing still in the middle of a stranger's kitchen with her eyes closed. Then she put the phone away and asked Do-yoon for the gallery keys. The gallery ran 40 feet behind conservation glass, 61 objects on 61 small thrones, humidity held at 50%, light at 50 lux. She worked the way she had been trained to work, gloves on, 1 lamp, 1 object, 1 hour. She began with the pieces the elders would ask about first, and built the report as she went, photographing, measuring, logging, her handwriting getting calmer as the rest of her did. Work was the one country where she had never needed a visa. Rain arrived that evening and leaned on the windows like a creditor. Tae-hyung appeared at the gallery door near 10, jacket gone, sleeves turned back, and watched her log a bunchung bottle for a while without announcing himself. You count clay the way my grandfather counts men. How does he count men? Slowly, twice. Then he and I will either get along, she said, or despise each other professionally. She set down the stylus. Who else handles these? Feeds the humidifiers, rotates them, moves them for cleaning? A conservation service, bonded, twice a year, supervised. He came a step inside the glass line, hands still behind him, and regarded the line of lit thrones the way other men look at photographs of their dead. My grandfather can name where every piece was bought, buried, hidden, or carried. During the war, the family kept the collection moving south in rice sacks, 1 jar per sack, 1 sack per man. He says a family that loses its objects starts forgetting what it promised. And what did it promise? That depends on which elder you ask. He held the door open a moment longer than the door required, and then he was gone down the hall. Saturday morning, the storm stopped auditioning and took the role. Wind came off the park in long swells that made the glass hum, and somewhere below, the city put its collar up. Over breakfast, he rehearsed her. They will ask how we met. At a preview of Korean ceramics, 14 months ago, she said, buttering toast she had no plans for. I corrected your dating of a bottle. You found that charming instead of insulting, which should have been my first warning. City Hall in the spring. No ring until now, because I work with my hands. She looked up. Good lies are mostly true. I did correct a man at a preview once. He survived. The elders will check the story against the staff, the drivers, the doormen. Then the staff, the drivers, and the doormen had better love me by Monday. He set his cup down. There is one rule in this family that has no exceptions. No one lies to the elders. Not the staff, not the heir. She sat with that a moment, listening to the wind take the building's measurements. And when your grandfather asks you directly, is she your wife? He will ask you first. You're the stranger. And if he asks you? He looked at her for a long second, and something behind the look closed like a ledger. I won't lie to him, and I won't answer him. Pray he accepts the difference. She reached the Maebyeong at noon. It stood on the center throne, lit like a saint, the inlaid celadon jar with cranes and clouds sunk in black and white slip, the oldest thing the family owned. His grandfather had guarded it since before Taehyun was born. Insurance carried it at a number with 2 commas. She lifted it the way she lifted everything, with both hands and no opinions. Something was wrong inside 90 seconds. The color came first. Bisak, the kingfisher glazed the 12th century dyed trying to perfect, lay across the shoulder too evenly, a sky with no weather in it. Genuine glaze breathes. This held its breath everywhere at once. Then the crackle. A fine net, knotted with a regularity no cooling kiln ever produced. She fetched the loop, in old Goryeo glaze, Bubbles hang suspended and uneven, like breath held in cold air. These sat in rows, tidy as an audit. She carried it into the dark and ran the lamp over it. Under ultraviolet, the shoulder bloomed a pale, modern violet. Her stomach did what it always did at moments like this, which was nothing at all. Then she turned the jar over. Pressed into the foot, beneath the glazed skin, where only a handler would ever look, sat a mark the size of a grain of rice, a stylized character inside a single circle. She photographed it, ran it against the reference library, and matched it on the first pass. A working kiln in Icheon, a living master's workshop. Icheon fires some of the most beautiful celadon in Korea, and has for decades, and it fired nothing whatsoever in the 12th century. She went back through it anyway, in order, out loud, the way she would have to say it to a room that wanted her to be wrong. Weight, 80 grams light for its walls, because modern kilns run cleaner. Foot, the clay too refined, levigated by machine, missing the coarse temper of a 12th century body. Inlay, the slip sat in the carving like paint in a stencil, without a single place where the carver's knife had wandered and been forgiven. Every answer agreed with every other answer. She checked until checking became stalling. Then she sat back on her heels, alone with 61 objects and one lie, and let the truth stand where she could see it. The family's oldest treasure was younger than she was. By dark, 2 more pieces refused to clear, a bunchong flask with slip too crisp at the shoulder, and a lacquered document box whose hinges were 40 years too young for their wood. She found Taehyun in the long room, the storm working the glass behind him, and laid the tablet on his desk with the photographs already up. "Your Maebyong is a copy," she said, "a masterwork of a copy, fired in Icheon within the last few years. The workshop mark is under the foot." He went very still, the way ice goes still, just before it thickens. "My grandfather has guarded that jar since before I was born. He guarded the original. This is a body double. Whoever commissioned it worked from the real piece. Every measurement, every crane, every flaw. That takes access. Keys. Time alone in this room. No one is alone in this room. Someone was." She swiped to the flask, then the box. "2 more I can't clear yet, and there's a pattern you need to hear whole." She told him about the moon jar, 40 floors down, authentic to the clay, and dressed in an export certificate, whose seal bit the wrong depth, and bloomed 11 petals where genuine seals carry 12. She had refused to sign it. The refusal was still sitting in a draft. Real objects moving out on forged papers. Forged objects sitting here on real pedestals. Your collection isn't being robbed, Mr. CO. Robbery is loud. This is being drained, quietly, with receipts. Who profits? He asked. Whoever sells the originals. A genuine Maebyong of that quality, with clean export papers, brings 8 figures in a private sale, and clean papers are exactly what someone tried to make me sign on Thursday. My signature would have laundered the jar downstairs. My license, my name, my reputation, wrapped around a forged seal. She kept her voice level, because level was the only speed that made it through. That's why the report mattered so much to somebody. That's why it had to be tonight. And in 3 days, 7 elders arrive expecting to bow to that jar. In 3 days, 7 elders bow to a copy, unless you tell them. The storm filled the silence with its own opinion. He crossed to the window, and for the first time since the lobby, she watched him choose a word instead of owning one. Do-yoon came up so fast, he had plainly been waiting near a phone. Taehyun turned from the glass. Thursday, my lobby. 2 trained men watched a resident call the police on my wife and studied the floor while she did it. I want the reason. Do-yoon laid a printed radio log on the desk, a page he had clearly been carrying for a day, hoping to be wrong about it. At 7:38, a stand-down order went out on the House channel. Valid authorization, an officer's code, civil matter, do not engage. And the freight elevator? Logged out of service at 6:50, same code. The men? I questioned them separately this morning. Their stories matched to the minute. They received the order, they confirmed the code, they obeyed it. They had no reason to doubt a house frequency. Do-yoon's voice stayed flat, and the flatness cost him something. They're my men. I trained them to obey that code. Whoever used it knew they would. Sienna heard her own Thursday replay itself with the sound turned all the way up. The freight car down for the night. The lobby as the only door left. The woman waiting on the settee with a speech already loaded. Someone had closed every exit but one, and let her walk into the one with teeth. Who holds that code? Taehyun asked. Officers of Seohan, 11 names. Do-yoon's jaw set. Every one of them a man who bows to your grandfather. Taehyun looked at the storm for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was a single syllable, in Korean, almost tender. Jui, a rat. The Whitmore woman had been the blade, then, and blades never aim themselves. Someone inside the house had pointed her at the one appraiser in the city who had already refused to sign, and the same hand was walking the family's memory out the door, one masterpiece at a time, leaving beautiful strangers on the pedestals. There's more, Do-yoon said, and set a second page beside the first. The same code has been managing Tuesday, the caterer, the cars, the seating. Taehyun read the seating chart once, and then again, slower, the paper perfectly steady in his hand. At the right hand of the patriarch's place, printed 3 days in advance, a small card read, MRS, SEO. Whoever the rat was, he had built the dinner around her, and he had known she would stay before she did. They left the card where it was. Moving it would have told the rat his chart had been read. So MRS, SEO stayed printed at the right hand of the patriarch's seat, and Sienna spent 2 days learning to sit in it. Sunday she cleared 11 more objects from the gallery. Monday, 9 more. 58 cleared, 3 flagged, and the flagged file renamed to something no caterer's assistant would think worth opening. Do-yoon spent the same 2 days on 11 names. Travel records, wires that moved sideways through Hong Kong. Family registries requested quietly from Seoul, one province at a time, through a clerk who owed him from another decade. 10 of the names came back ordinary. The 11th registry was still crossing the Pacific when the plane carrying the delegation touched down at 2 on Tuesday afternoon. The cars arrived at 4. 3 of them, black, riding low in the rain that had owned the city since Friday night. Seo Jumpyo came through the penthouse doors first, and the room rearranged itself around him. 71 years old, slim as a reed and twice as straight, silver-white hair combed with the discipline of a man who had never once been late. He wore a charcoal Duramagi-style coat over a black suit and carried a black lacquered cane with a silver handle that he plainly needed for nothing. A jade signet ring sat on his hand like a verdict waiting to be read. Behind him came 7 elders in dark wool, and behind them, carrying nothing but a slim briefcase, came a man in a dove-gray double-breasted suit. Park Sang-hoon, the man said, bowing to Sienna precisely as deep as courtesy required, and not 1 degree more. Thin gold-rimmed glasses, a small dark mole under the left eye, black leather gloves, indoors, that he made no move to remove. I manage the family's accounts, and its arrangements. Then I should thank you, Sienna said. The arrangements have been flawless. Something moved behind the fox narrow eyes and settled again. He bowed a second time and stepped aside for the patriarch. Junpyo stopped in front of her and studied her face the way a man reads a contract he has been warned about. Sienna bowed, low, unhurried, hands folded, the bow she had practiced in the East Room mirror until her back knew it without her. You are the wife, Junpyo said. in English for her benefit, which was itself a kind of test. "I'm Sienna," she said. "Welcome to New York, Halabeoji." One of the elders drew a breath. Junpyo's mouth did something that on a softer face might have become a smile, then thought better of it. He turned to his grandson and spoke in Korean, low and brief, and Taehyun answered in Korean, lower and briefer, and the old man walked past them both toward the wall of glass and the drowned city behind it. At 5, they walked the gallery. Junpyo moved down the 40 feet of conservation glass at the pace of a man walking through his own memory. He named pieces without reading the labels. He told an elder which auction had returned the buncheong flask to the family and what it had cost, and the number had not shrunk in the telling. Then he reached the Maebyeong and stopped. He stood in front of the celadon for a long time. Cranes and clouds under that even bisek glaze, machine regular crackle catching the 50 lux like frost. "My grandmother carried this south in a rice sack," he said. "She walked 11 days. She ate twice." 7 old men inclined their heads toward the case. Sienna kept her hands folded and her face composed, and if her thumbnail pressed a white crescent into her own palm, the glass reflected none of it. "You are the ceramics expert," Junpyo said, without turning. "My grandson married a woman who reads clay. What do you make of it?" The question hung there, mild as poison. She could feel Sang-hoon watching her from the end of the case. "It's the piece I'd carry out first," Sienna said, "if the building were burning." Junpyo turned then and looked at her fully. 11 days, he said. She would approve of a woman who thinks in exits. Dinner was at 8. The caterer had dressed the long table in linen and laid the place cards exactly as printed. Sienna found her name at the patriarch's right hand and sat down onto the chair the rat had chosen for her, and let the staff pour her water, and smiled. The first hour was a minefield crossed slowly. The elders had spent the afternoon the way old men of that house spend afternoons, talking to drivers, talking to porters, letting the housekeeper pour their tea slowly enough to answer questions between cups. Whatever the staff had given them, none of it had tripped a wire yet. The cook had called her Mrs. CO for 4 days and meant it. That kind of testimony has no seams to pick at. So they came at her directly instead. One elder asked which district of Seoul her husband's mother had been born in, and Taehyun answered it for her in Korean before the trap could set, smooth as passing a dish. Another asked what she thought of celadon against porcelain, and that one she took gladly because clay was the one subject on earth where she never had to perform. Then Junpyo asked how they met, and she gave him the preview, 14 months ago, a Korean ceramics preview, a bottle mislabeled by half a century. "Your grandson was standing next to the case when I corrected the dating," she said. "He asked me if I was always that certain. I said only about clay. And the wedding? City Hall, spring, small." She turned her water glass a quarter turn. "I work with my hands, halabeoji. Rings and gloves argue with each other. I only started wearing this one when the work allowed it." The platinum band sat on her finger, catching candlelight. 2 elders looked at it. One nodded slowly, as if a sum had come out even. Across the table, Taehyun ate little and said less, which the elders seemed to find correct. Do-yoon stood at the wall with the caterer's staff flowing around him like water around a piling. It was over the last course that Sang-hoon set his briefcase on his knees. He did it without hurry, the way a man opens a door he has already unlocked. He drew out a leather folder, rose, walked the length of the table, and laid it beside the patriarch's plate with both gloved hands. "Forgive me, halabeoji," he said. "There is a matter of the house's dignity that will not wait." The table went quiet in sections, like lights going off down a hallway. "A work order," Sang-hoon said. "Calloway and Pierce, Appraisal Services, Unit 4001, this building, dated last Thursday. The appraiser signed in at the service entrance with a vendor pass. Her signature is at the bottom. He paused, and the pause was rehearsed. The signature reads S. Carter. Junpyo opened the folder. There is also a letter of resignation from the same firm, dated Friday, same signature. Sang-hoon went on, softer now, warming to the kill. And there is no marriage. I searched the registry of New York County myself. No license, no certificate. 14 months, halabeoji, and the city has never heard of it. 5 days ago, this woman was a vendor in this building. Tonight, she is seated at your right hand. The candle flames leaned in a draft nobody felt. Junpyo read the work order fully, then the letter. Then he closed the folder, set it down as gently as porcelain, and turned to his grandson. Tae-hyuna, the old voice had gravel under it now. Dap-hae. Answer me. Tae-hyun set down his glass. He looked at his grandfather the way he had looked at the storm, level, unhurried, giving the weather nothing, and he said not one word. The silence stretched until it creaked. An elder murmured to another. Somewhere down the table, a chair shifted, and the sound of it was enormous. You will not lie to me, Junpyo said slowly. This I raised you to, but you will not answer me either. He looked from his grandson to Sienna and back, and something old and tired crossed the lined face. Then the paper answers for you. Sienna stood up. She did it smoothly, the chair sliding back without a scrape, because her grandmother had taught her that you never let a room see the exit cost you anything. She slid the ring off her finger. It came easily. It had been sized to, and set it down on the place card, on the small printed lie that read, MRS, SEO, where it made a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Thank you for the dinner, halabeoji, she said. Whatever else was false at this table, the food was not, and neither was the bow. Junpyo watched her, unreadable. She looked at the folder by his plate. Those papers carry my signature. Where I come from, you keep what carries your name. She held out her hand. I'll take them. They are evidence of a fraud, Sang-hoon said, glove flat on the leather. Give them to her, Junpyo said. For half a second, Sang-hoon's hand stayed where it was. Then he lifted the folder and delivered it into her open palm with a small bow, and behind the gold rims, his eyes were already filing her under closed accounts. She tucked it under her arm and walked out. 20 feet of silence to the door. Taehyun watched her go and made no move at all, and that stillness followed her out of the room like a hand between her shoulder blades. Do-yoon rode down with her. Not the brass car, the main elevator, the public one, the one that ended in marble. He kept his eyes forward and his hands folded, and at the 40th floor he said, quietly, the service dock on 68th is dry. The awning is deep. She heard it. She filed it. The lobby at 10:30 was nearly empty, which meant the audience was small and perfectly chosen. Evelyn Whitmore sat on the settee in pearl gray tweed with a lawyer's envelope squared on her knees, positioned with a view of the elevators, waiting the way she had waited 5 days ago, as if the building were a theater and she held season tickets to this particular seat. Oh, Evelyn said, rising. Oh, my dear. Sienna kept walking. Filed at 4 this afternoon. Evelyn lifted the envelope like a fan. Harassment. Unlawful eviction, naming the owner, and the woman posing as his wife. My attorneys were very interested in the word posing. Her heels ticked along beside Sienna for 3 delicious steps. No ring, I see. They never last, these arrangements. The staircase people always find the street again, dear. It's a kind of gravity. At the desk, Raymond Osgood found something urgent in his ledger and studied it with his whole soul. Sienna reached the doors. Behind her, Evelyn's voice rose one bright, carrying note. Mind the rain. Then the doors, and the rain took her. No coat, no umbrella. The storm came down in ropes, and the cold went through the ivory silk in 4 steps. Her phone was in her bag, and in her phone was her whole arithmetic. A nursing home paid through one more month. A firm that had reinstated her under pressure that had just walked out of the building. A formal complaint with the word posing in it working its way toward somebody's desk. 5 days ago, she'd had a probation clock and a draft report. Tonight, she had a folder full of accusations with her name on them and a lobby full of witnesses to her exit. She turned east, down 68th, with water running off her jaw. There was a subway 3 blocks south that went home. Her legs took her the other way, along the granite flank of the building, past the ramp, under the deep awning of the service dock, into the dry yellow cone of the loading light. The same door she'd been sent to 5 days ago with a vendor pass. She stood there dripping. Somewhere 40 floors up, 7 old men were deciding a succession over her empty chair. She could walk to the train and be nobody again by midnight, or she could do what she was built to do. She set her bag on the dry concrete, wiped her hands on the one dry stripe left inside her blazer, and opened the folder, because paper had never once lied to her, and everyone else this week had. She held the work order under the light. The engagement block was standard Callaway and Pierce boilerplate. Client name, billing address, authorization line. She read it once, and the cold stopped mattering. Client, Hyacinth Holdings LLC. The same shell that leased 4001 with no human name attached. The client who had demanded a signed report by Thursday night. The client whose complaint had reached her firm 22 minutes after Evelyn's call to the police. She pulled out her lope with wet fingers and put it to the resignation letter, and there it was, obvious as a shout. Her S traced instead of written, pen pressure even as machine stitching, the little tremor of a hand copying a shape it never owned. She authenticated signatures for a living. Someone had forged hers and fed it to a patriarch. Mrs. Seo. Do-yoon stepped into the light with rain sheeting off the awning behind him. From inside his jacket, he drew the clear plastic sleeve she had last seen 5 days ago. 4 torn pieces of paper, edges matched, exactly as archived off the marble floor. The lease of Unit 2301, he said. Whitmore, renewed in March. His finger touched the sleeve, tapping a rider clause on the 3rd fragment. Read the guarantor. She read it through the plastic. She read it twice. Rent guaranteed by Hyacinth Holdings LLC. 11 years in the building, Do-yoon said. Since March, someone else pays her rent. Sienna looked up from one document to the other, and the whole 5 days resorted themselves in her head, like a shelf being set right. The empty unit, the rushed report, the service entrance, the freight elevator down for the night, the stand down at 1938, the woman waiting on the settee since lunch, twice now, with perfect timing, not weather, choreography. She wasn't the storm, Sienna said slowly. She was the umbrella somebody opened. Aimed, said a voice from the dark end of the dock, is the better word. Taehyun came into the light with his overcoat soaked across the shoulders, and he took his time about it, because down here, there was no table of elders to hold still for. You left your own dinner, she said. The dinner did what it was built to do. He stopped an arm's length away. Both versions of it. You knew. The folder was shaking slightly in her hand. She made it stop. You sat there and let him gut me in front of your grandfather, and you said nothing, and you knew. I knew there was a rat with an officer's code and 11 possible faces. His voice stayed level, but something under it had gone very cold. Suspicion is not proof, and my grandfather does not eat suspicion. If I had accused Sang-hoon at that table with empty hands, the house would have closed around him, and I would have been the jealous heir slandering the loyal accountant. No one lies to the elders, so I needed him to carry his lie to the table himself, on paper, in front of witnesses. His eyes dropped to the folder, and then I needed the paper out of his hands before he could burn it. She stared at him. Give them to her, she said. Your grandfather, gives a woman her own name back. He has done it before. A beat. I only bet everything on him doing it again. The rain hammered the awning. She looked down at the work order, the client line, the traced signature, and up again. Hyacinth commissioned the appraisal. Hyacinth pays Evelyn. Hyacinth complained to my firm at 2002. She laid it out flat, appraiser's voice, item by item. And a CO Han officer's code stood the guards down at 1938 and killed the freight elevator at 1850. That's not two hands. That's one. Say the name, Taehyun said quietly. Do-yoon's phone buzzed against his chest. He read it, and his aging boxer face did something it had not done in 5 days. It changed. The 11th registry, he said. Seoul just sent it. He turned the screen into the light. Park Sang-hoon. Mother's family. Potters out of Gyeonggi province. The family kiln has fired since 1974. His thumb moved. A photograph filled the screen. A kiln mark. A stylized character in a circle, stamped in a catalog page. Sienna pulled up her own photograph beside it. The mark hidden under the foot of the Maebyeong, small as a grain of rice. The same circle. The same character. His grandfather's mark under his family's forgery, sitting in a vitrine that 7 elders had bowed to at 5 o'clock. Aikyeon, she said. The word came out half-breath. Jinja, Do-yoon murmured, which needed no translating at all. He drained the collection through his mother's kiln and papered it with my firm. Sienna's mind was running now, fast and level, the way it ran over a foot ring. The moon jar was the next one out the door. Genuine piece, forged export seal, and my signature was supposed to launder it. When I wouldn't sign, I became the problem. So he built Thursday night. He rented Evelyn. He stood down your guards. He wanted me arrested or fired before I could put the discrepancy in writing. She stopped. And when you married me instead, he rebuilt the whole trap upstairs and set my chair himself. And tonight he handed you, personally, the only document that ties Hyacinth to this building's own paper trail. Taehyun looked at the folder under her arm, and the corner of his mouth moved a fraction of an inch. Only 2 parties ever held that work order, the firm and the client. He filed his own confession, my grandfather touched it, and then it walked out of my dining room under the arm of the one person in New York qualified to read it. The chain closed link by link in the yellow light, and for a moment, the only sound was the storm. Then Do-yoon touched his earpiece. He listened, and his hand came away slowly. House channel, he said. The officer's code. 4 minutes ago. The gallery cameras go to maintenance at 1 a.m. A pause. And the freight elevator has just been returned to service. Nobody spoke. 40 floors of dark granite stood over them, and somewhere inside it, machinery that had been dead since Thursday was waking up on a trader's key. He knows the papers left with you, Taehyun said. He cannot let them see morning, which means neither will he wait for it. He looked at her, rain still moving off the awning in sheets behind him, and held his hand out toward the service door, the door she had once been sent to as a humiliation, standing open now like an accomplice. As far as that table knows, you walked into the rain with nothing, he said. Come back up the way he made you come in. Let's keep you dead until 1 o'clock. The service door swallowed her without a sound. Sienna climbed the same concrete stairwell she'd been sent up 5 days ago with a paper badge on her lapel, except now she climbed it soaked to the skin, holding a leather folder against her ribs like a rib that had come loose. Do-yoon went first. Taehyun came last, one landing behind, listening down the shaft. At the 40th floor, Do-yoon keyed them through a fire door and into a corridor she had never been shown. Gray carpet, no art. At the end of it stood a steel door with a keypad and a wheel, painted the same bone color as the wall, easy to walk past 100 times. The studio, Taehyun said. The one room the deal had fenced off. He spun the wheel and pulled, and the door came open on 8 inches of steel and a breath of cold, dry air. Inside, the room was a vault dressed as a study, climate gauges on the wall, a plain desk, and shelving, floor to ceiling, packed with ledgers, deeds, photographs in archival sleeves, 60 years of the Sohan house on paper, the part of a family that burns last. My grandfather thinks these records are in Seoul, he said. Every man in this building thinks this room is where I sulk. He set his palm flat on the desk. The originals live here, which means everything you carry belongs here too. Tonight, this is the safest room in New York. They built the audit on the desk, the 3 of them, while the storm worked the glass somewhere beyond the steel. The work order with Hyacinth Holdings LLC in the client block. The forged resignation letter, her traced signature flagged with an archivist's tab. The 4 pieces of Evelyn's lease in their plastic sleeve. The rider face up, rent guaranteed by Hyacinth Holdings LLC. The radio logs, stand down at 7:38, freight elevator killed at 6:50, 1 officer's code under both. The Seoul registry page, and beside it her photograph of the rice grain kiln mark under the false Mabyong's foot. The same character in the same circle, 700 years apart in claim and 51 in fact. Last, she opened her tablet and laid it at the head of the table like a keystone. The moon jar report, still a draft, still unsigned, the reservation line, glowing in the dark room, export documentation discrepancy, verification required prior to certification. 11 petals, she said. The whole machine broke on 1 flower. Taehyun read the line twice. He needed your name. You gave him arithmetic instead. Names can be argued with. She squared the last tab. Arithmetic just sits there and waits. Do-yoon photographed every page, twice, and sent nothing anywhere. Then he checked his watch and touched his earpiece and began speaking Korean into it, low and fast-moving men, the way a chess player clears his own back rank. At 12:40, the house went still on purpose. Lights out on the gallery floor. Guards visibly posted at the main elevator, visibly, and only there. The freight corridor left dark, unwatched, open, an invitation with the crusts cut off. At 12:51, Taehyun took her elbow. Inside, I can testify to what I see. You can testify to what survives. He walked her backward through the steel doorway, and for the first time in 5 days, his voice dropped out of its tailored calm into something older. Every piece of paper that can end him is in this room. So is the only witness who can read all of it. If it goes wrong out there, the door stays shut, and you let it stay shut. That is the term. It is not negotiable. She looked at the shelves, 60 years of a family at her back, and then at him. Come get your archive in the morning, Mr. Seo. Something crossed his face that had never been in the contract. Then the door swung, the wheel turned, and the world outside became a rumor. Steel is honest about what it keeps out. Sound, mostly. She stood in the cold hum of the climate system with a single desk lamp burning, and her own pulse for a clock. 12:58, 12:59. At 1, somewhere below her feet, a camera system rolled its eyes shut on a trader's code, and a freight elevator that had been dead for 5 days rose through the building like a filled syringe. What happened next, she heard only in pieces, through 8 inches of steel, and pieced together whole in the hours after. 3 men came off the freight car at the 40th floor. Coveralls, contractor badges printed that afternoon. A hand truck with 2 steel cans of solvent and a burn bag. They had a floor plan with the gallery marked and a second mark on the east guest room. Her room, because the man who sent them believed in finishing sentences. They got 11 feet. The dark corridor came alive on battery lanterns Do-yoon had staged at ankle height, and the men walked into light the way fish walk into a net, which is to say all at once and far too late. No shot was fired. Do-yoon's people took them to the floor with the tidy economy of men who consider noise a form of failure, zip ties at wrist and ankle, faces to the carpet between two vitrines of 500-year-old porcelain that never even trembled. The oldest of the three had a phone in his breast pocket. It was still warm. The last message, time-stamped 12:44, in Korean, files first. Then the room on the east side. Bring me her tablet whole. Do-yoon read it, and read the number it came from, and for a long moment, the gallery's conservation glass held the reflection of a man, deciding how much of his own anger to keep. Jinja, he said softly, for the second time that night, and this time it was not wonder. At 1:22, the wheel on the steel door turned. Sienna had counted every minute of it standing, folder in her arms, and when the door opened on Taehyun, jacket gone, shirt open at the throat, alive, the breath went out of her in one piece. The archive kept, he said. And the rats? Bagged, with the receipt in their pocket. He held up the phone in an evident sleeve of its own. He signed this night the way he signed everything else. From a distance, in writing, certain no one would ever hold the paper. She looked at the message glowing through the plastic, her tablet, her room, her name reduced to a target, and set it on the desk with the rest, in order, at the end of the row. Then we're done building, she said. Wake the patriarch. They woke no one. That was Taehyun's last piece of craft. The elders rose at 5 by habit, and grief delivered at dawn, lands as truth, while grief delivered at 2 lands as panic. So the house held its breath until the sky over the river turned the color of unglazed clay, and then Do-yoon knocked on doors, and the Seohan delegation assembled in the long room where 14 hours earlier a woman had been unmade over dessert. Junpyo came last, Kane first, in a pressed shirt at 6 in the morning, as if creased cotton were a moral position. He stopped when he saw her. Sienna stood at the head of the table she'd been expelled from, dry now, in her own blazer, the folder squared in front of her, and the ring conspicuously absent from her hand. She bowed, exactly as far as she had bowed the first time. You walked into the rain, Junpyo said. I walked around it. Halabeoji. She laid her palm flat on the folder. Last night, you were told the paper answers for your grandson. With respect, the paper wasn't finished. She gave it to them the way she gave every appraisal of her life. No adjectives, exhibits in order, conclusions last, the work order, client block face up, the shell company that leased 4001, that demanded a signed report by Thursday night, that filed a complaint against her 22 minutes after a 911 call it had no way to know about. The lease fragments, the rider naming the same shell as guarantor of Evelyn Whitmore's rent since March, the stand-down log and the dead freight elevator, one officer's code under both, the same code that built Tuesday's seating chart and printed a card that said MRS, SEO 3 days before anyone asked her to stay. The resignation letter and the lope she set beside it. The S is traced. Uniform pressure, copy tremor. Any document examiner in this city will say it in an affidavit by Friday. Then the tablet, the moonjar draft, the reservation line, the seal photographed at magnification next to the ministry references. The jar is genuine. The 1962 export certificate under it is not. The embossment bites deepest at the rim, and the Rose of Sharon carries 11 petals against 12 in every authentic example on record. A signed appraisal from my firm would have laundered it for private sale. I declined to sign. Everything that has happened to me since Thursday at 7:40 happened because I declined to sign. And last, the sole registry page and the kiln mark, side by side, and she watched 7 old men lean in over the little circled character, like men leaning over a grave. The Maebyeong in that gallery is 51 years old, she said. It came out of a family kiln in Gyeonggi province, active since 1974. 2 more pieces are staged for the same substitution: a bunchung flask and a lacquered document box. 58 of 61 objects are clean. I can defend every line of this under oath. She closed the folder. The kiln belongs to the maternal family of Park Sang-hoon. The name went down the table like cold water down a spine. Every gray head turned to the man in dove gray at the far end, who had come to dawn assembly fully dressed, gloves on, because some men sleep in their armor. Sang-hoon rose, unhurried, and Sienna understood she was watching a professional. "A vendor reads our registry now," he said in English, for the room. "This woman forges a marriage, and you let her forge a... Iyo. Kayun Junpyo's voice stayed at conversation volume and cut the room in half anyway. "End it." He extended one hand, and Do-yoon crossed the floor and laid the sealed phone in it. Message lit. The old man read. His thumb moved once over the plastic, over the words "the room on the east side," and the lines of his face rearranged into something Sienna hoped never to see aimed at her. "3 men are in my grandson's storeroom with their hands tied," Junpyo said. "This number sent them. Your family's kiln fed our gallery a corpse, and my elders bowed to it while you watched." He set the phone down with terrible gentleness. "Daughter of no house, read the clay, and told me the truth, standing in the place you built to hang her. You held our ledgers for 11 years and used them to sell our memory back to us." Sang-hoon's mouth opened once. His eyes went down the table looking for one ally, one abstention, one gray head willing to meet his, and found 7 men studying the wood in front of them. He straightened his gloves at the wrist, a small, fastidious motion, the last piece of grooming available to him. What came out, finally, was procedure. "I am owed a hearing in Seoul. You are owed ink." The book came up from Junpyo's own luggage, narrow, cloth-bound, older than everyone in the room but him, and was opened flat on the table to a column of names, brushed down decades. Do-yoon ground the ink himself. And in front of 7 elders and the woman he had tried to erase, the patriarch of the Seohan loaded a brush and drew one unhurried black stroke through Park Sang-hoon, top of the characters to the bottom, the way you cross out a sum that was wrong from the first digit. No one raised a voice. That was the sentence. A room full of men who would never again say his name, a line of wet ink drying, and Do-yoon's hand arriving on his shoulder like the closing of a ledger. What waited for him after the room, the firm's fraud referral, the phone, the affidavits, would happen in daylight, in courts, in writing. He had always trusted paper. Now the paper was all his. They walked him out past the gallery. He looked at the false Maebyeong exactly once. Evelyn Whitmore's morning arrived 2 hours later, and it arrived on letterhead. Her attorneys had opened the day fat with a harassment complaint. By 9, they had received the rider bearing her own initials, proof that for 5 months her rent had been paid by the shell company of a man arrested overnight for defrauding the building's owner. A tenancy procured and sustained by fraud is not a tenancy. The stay dissolved like sugar. The complaint, naming as it did the woman posing as his wife, was quietly withdrawn by counsel, who preferred not to discuss who had posed as a rent-paying resident for 5 months. Sienna was crossing the lobby at 10:30, main entrance, her own name on her lips for anyone who asked, when the movers' dollies came off the truck. Evelyn stood at the marble island in yesterday's tweed, supervising the removal of 11 years in numbered boxes, and, for one raw second, their eyes met across the floor, where a 911 call had once been placed on speaker. "You," Evelyn said. "Me," Sienna agreed, and kept walking, because there are victories you narrate and victories you simply wear. Behind her, the socialite's voice climbed half an octave, something about lawyers, something about friends, the same 2 gods she had prayed to on Thursday, and the marble took the sound and returned it thin. The gym clothes couple by the mailroom found somewhere else to look. 11 years of the lobby belonging to her, ended by the arithmetic on her own lease. Behind her, Raymond Osgood held the door for the boxes going out. He was scrupulously, luminously professional about it. The building's new standing order had reached his desk at 8. Ms. Whitmore's name on the barred list, effective on vacancy, no exceptions, initialed at the bottom in a hand that belonged to the owner's grandfather. The delegation flew out that evening. The 5 days were over. Jun Pyo asked for her before the cars came. She found him alone in the gallery, both hands on the cane, in front of the empty plinth where the false Mabyong had stood, the piece already crated for evidence, the vitrine bare, and the old man studying the absence the way other men study the sea. "My grandmother walked 11 days for a jar," he said. "You would have carried it out first, if the building were burning. You told me so at this glass." He turned. "You also never once told me you were married." Sienna held his eyes. "No, sir, I never did." "I noticed. Everyone else in this city lied to my face with documents. You handed me silence and clay." He moved to the small table by the gallery door, where 2 documents lay squared beside each other, and touched the first with 1 finger. "This is a contract. Exclusive curator of the Seohan collection, both continents, drawn at terms my accountants find offensive. The collection has 61 objects and 1 hole in it. Fill the hole, watch the rest. No one alive reads our clay better, and I am done pretending that is a small thing." She read it standing, both pages, the way she read everything. Her firm, her 60 days, the badge she'd worn for 6 years. The whole arithmetic of her old life ran once and came up obsolete. The salary line alone held her grandmother's window bed for as long as her grandmother wanted a window. On the 1st of every month, from now on, the phone would stay silent. Then he touched the second document and said nothing at all. It was a New York State marriage registration, blank. Every line of it, names, date, witnesses, empty as a field in first snow, with a pen laid across it at a courteous diagonal. "Hal Abeoji, an old man leaves papers where he pleases," Jumpyo said, already walking, cane ringing softly on the gallery floor. At the door he paused, back still turned. "The house confirms my grandson. Tell him the exile is over. Tell him also that his grandfather is not a fool, and was not fooled, and signed nothing that was not true." A beat. "Neither, I notice, did you. It is a good habit in a family." The cars left at 7. By 8, the penthouse had exhaled its caterers and its formality, and the storm that had sat on the city since Friday finally broke apart over the river, and Sienna Carter went to return an archive. The steel door stood open. Taehyun was inside alone, jacket off, restoring folders to shelves by the light of the 1 desk lamp, and she stopped in the doorway with the audit folder in her arms and watched him put his family back in order. "Delivery," she said. 60 years of Seohan, 1 trader, and a draft report I can finally finish. The jar's paper trail gets rebuilt clean through the ministry. 8 weeks. Then I sign. Invoiced, standard rate." He took the folder and set it on the desk, and then he took her hand, the bare one, and turned it over, and looked at the pale, untouched band of skin where 5 days of platinum had lived. "My grandfather left something in the gallery," he said. "Your grandfather leaves papers where he pleases. So I'm told." He was very close now, and the lamp put its light along the dragon at his collar, and the vault held its cold hush around them like held breath. 5 days, he said. You counted them. Terms met. Ring returned. Career restored. You could walk out of this building tonight, owing nothing, Sienna Carter, and no one would follow you. I know, she said. I read my contracts twice. Then why are you standing in my vault? She could have said, the blank license. She could have said, the window bed, the curatorship, the 61 objects. What she said was nothing, and the nothing was the truest line she'd spoken all week, and he reached past her shoulder and pushed the steel door, and it swung its 8 honest inches and shut the lamp, the archive, and the two of them into the dark. His voice came from an inch away, smooth as the platinum had been cold. Thursday night, you grabbed a stranger's sleeve and called him husband in front of his men. I warned you what that word costs. His hand found her jaw in the black, tilted it up, unhurried, certain. The husband you called has come to collect. She paid. The first kiss landed the way he did everything. Quiet, absolute, no witnesses and no appeal. Her fingers closing in his shirt, like she'd once closed them in his sleeve, and the dark of the vault kept it, the way vaults keep what a family cannot afford to lose. Some debts you pay forever. She'd read the terms. She signed. The wheel on the vault door turned from the inside, and Sienna stepped out first, smoothing the front of her blazer the way she smoothed paper before reading it. The corridor lights had come up to their nighttime setting, low and gold, and somewhere below them the city was wringing the last of the storm out of its streets. Taehyun sealed the door behind them and spun the wheel until it stopped. 8 inches of steel between the world and 60 years of the family's paper. He held out her tablet, which she had left on the vault table beside the folder. She took it with 2 fingers, and their hands stayed a half-second longer than the exchange required. 8 weeks, she said. 8 weeks, he said. I've waited longer for less. She walked to the east room on her own. She turned the bolt out of habit, then stood with her hand on it, then turned it back the other way. She left it unlocked. She slept anyway, deep and dreamless, the way the exhausted sleep when the ledger finally balances. The next morning, she took a car alone to the Brightwater Care Center, and for the first time since she was 23, she arrived on a weekday morning without watching the meter. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and oatmeal. She signed the visitor book with her own name, no company, no title, and the pen felt light. Her grandmother sat in the bed by the window with a lap blanket folded in thirds, and a church program from 3 Sundays ago on the side table, saved because the choir list had a cousin's name on it. Her hands lay on the blanket the way retired hands lie, still shaped for work. 60 years of seams had bent the first knuckle of her right forefinger into a small, permanent question mark. You're here on a Thursday, her grandmother said. Somebody died, or somebody's getting married. Neither. Sienna pulled the chair close and sat. I got a new job. You had a job. I got a better one. Her grandmother reached over and took her hand, and her thumb found the band of pale skin at the base of the ring finger, the way it used to find a skipped stitch in the dark, by feel, before the eye caught up. She turned the hand toward the window light and studied it. Uh-huh, she said. And what do they call this better job? Curator. Sienna let the hand stay where it was. A private collection. Korean ceramics. It's the work I trained for, and they pay for it like they mean it. The first of the month is going to be quiet from now on. No calls. I never minded the calls. I minded them. Her grandmother nodded slowly, still holding the hand, still reading the pale stripe on it with her thumb, and let the subject sit between them without pressing it. That was her way. She had raised a daughter and then a granddaughter on the principle that a good seam doesn't show, and that you find out what a thing is made of by pulling at it gently, once, and watching what moves. When I was working, she said, the ladies would bring me a dress and say, fix the hem, that's all, just the hem. And I'd turn it inside out, and the whole lining would be hanging by a prayer, but they only asked for the hem. She patted the hand once and gave it back. You ask for the whole lining, baby. Whatever this is, you make them show you the whole lining. I already did, Sienna said. I counted everything twice. Then why isn't there a ring on it? Sienna turned her own hand over and looked at the pale band as if it belonged to a client. There was one for a few days. It was a work arrangement. The arrangement ended, and I gave it back. You gave it back. Her grandmother repeated it, the way she used to repeat a customer's measurements, slowly, to catch the lie in the numbers. And the man took it back? He put it in his pocket. A man who wanted it gone would have left it on the table. She reached for the water glass, drank a small, careful sip, and set it down on the church program, dead center, a paperweight on the choir list. And now there's new paper somewhere, with your name near it. I can hear it in your voice. You talk different when there's paper. Because I read everything before I sign. Her grandmother laughed, low, the laugh that had gotten her through 6 decades of other people's weddings. That's my fault, she said. I taught you that. She looked out the window at the wet street, at a delivery man wrestling a hand truck over the curb, and her face settled. Your mother signed fast, both times. You take your 8 weeks, or your 8 years, whatever number it is. The right paper keeps. Sienna had said nothing about 8 weeks. She kissed her grandmother's forehead, and the old woman held her sleeve a moment, fabric between finger and thumb, and rubbed it, appraising the wool of the blazer the way Sienna appraised clay. Better job, her grandmother agreed, and let her go. At 1 o'clock, Sienna walked into the offices of Calloway and Pierce, for the last time as an employee. The reception wall still carried the firm's name in brushed steel, and the junior staff still moved through the corridors, carrying condition reports like altar servers. Hale was waiting for her at the conference room door, which meant someone downstairs had called up the moment she entered the lobby. He had shaved carefully and worn the good tie, and both of those told her more than anything he was about to say. Sienna, we were going to reach out. You reached out on a Thursday night 5 days ago, she said, and rescinded on a Friday morning. I got the full range. He held the door. The conference table had 2 folders on it, squared to the edge, and a bottle of water set at the chair he intended for her. She sat in a different chair. He noted it and adjusted, sliding the folders across. The partners met this morning, he said. The probationary period is concluded, effective today, ahead of schedule. There's also an adjustment. Senior Specialist, East Asian Ceramics. Your own letterhead. He turned the first folder toward her and opened it like a man showing a good hand. The firm recognizes that recent events were handled badly. The firm recognizes that the Seo Han collection has a new curator, Sienna said, and that the curator remembers exactly which client's phone call bought her a suspension in 22 minutes. Hale's jaw worked once. That client is being referred to prosecutors. We're cooperating fully. I know. My affidavit is part of what you're cooperating with. She drew the second folder toward her, glanced at the title page of the promotion contract, and closed it. From her bag, she took a single sheet, already typed, already dated. She laid it on the table between them and signed it in front of him, letting him watch the pen the whole way through. The strong S, the pressure that lightened where it always lightened, the small lift before the final R. A signature written by a living hand, once, at speed. Then she photographed it, the way she photographed everything she signed. For the record, she said, so there's no confusion later about which resignation letters are real. Hale looked at the sheet for a long moment. The firm would have made you a partner in 5 years. The firm made me use the service entrance for 6. She stood and shouldered the bag. That's not in your file, Mr. Hale, because it never happened in this building, but it's in mine. At the door she paused, because the last 5 days had taught her the value of leaving one clean thing behind in every room. The Moonjar report stays in draft until the export record is rebuilt through the ministry. 8 weeks. When it certifies through whoever the client's counsel designates. If that's this firm, I'll work with your people professionally. The jar was never the problem. And what was the problem? The paper, she said. It's always the paper. She rode down through the lobby she had walked 10,000 times, past the brushed steel name, and out onto the street, and the air tasted like a city after rain, which is to say, like a thing that has been scrubbed and knows it won't stay clean and doesn't mind. The Ashworth's main entrance had a new doorman shift posted, but Raymond Osgood was still at the desk, and when she came through the doors, his back straightened by degrees, like a man bracing for weather. The ledger lay open in front of him. Beside it, squared neatly to the blotter's corner, sat the vendor log, the cloth-bound one from the service entrance, brought up to the front desk that morning by someone's instruction. Raymond's hand hovered near it as she approached, uncertain whether he was meant to hide it or present it. Mrs. He stopped himself. Ms. Carter. Mr. C.O. asked that the log be brought up. He said you'd know what to do with it. She turned the pages back 1 week. Thursday. Her own handwriting, the tight block letters of a woman filling out a form she resented, and in the license plate column, the single word she had written at 8 in the morning while a man checked her bag for burglary tools: Subway. She looked at it for a moment, and something that was almost a smile crossed her face and kept going. Tear out the page, Raymond offered quietly. I'll do it myself. Nobody has to. Leave it in. She closed the log and slid it back to him. Archives are only worth keeping when they keep the embarrassing parts. I'd expect a concierge to know that better than anyone. She let that settle on him, watched him absorb it, watched him decide to survive it. One change, Raymond. When crates move in and out of this building, mine or anyone's, they go through the service corridor, because that is how objects travel safely, and I will be in the corridor with them. So you'll be seeing me at the 68th Street door regularly. Raymond blinked. The front entrance is, you're entitled to. I know what I'm entitled to. I'm telling you how art moves. She picked up her bag. The difference, going forward, is that the door is a tool. It was never supposed to be a verdict. He was still turning that over when the elevator took her. She rode up with 2 residents and a dry cleaning delivery, and neither resident looked at her twice, and she understood that in a building, as in a family, the weather changes from the top down. Upstairs, Do-yoon had the day's paper spread on the long table with the discipline of a man debriefing a campaign. Her affidavit on the forged resignation letter, notarized that morning, went into a labeled sleeve. The bagged cell phone had been signed over to the district attorney's office at 10. The 3 men from the freight elevator had been transferred at dawn, and one of them, the older one, was already talking, which Do-yoon reported with the satisfaction of a fisherman describing the tide. The first letter to the Ministry of Culture in Seoul, requesting archival verification of all export certificates, issued in March of 1962, had gone out by courier under the Seohan seal, with her technical annex attached. The seal, the bite depth, the 11 petals, photographed at magnification, laid out like a lesson. The ministry answers in its own time, Do-yoon said. Weeks. 8, Sienna said. I put it in writing. You put everything in writing. That's why I'm still here. Do-yoon almost smiled, which on his face was a seismic event, and gathered his sleeves and folders and left her the afternoon. She spent it in the gallery finishing what the week had interrupted, the last 3 plinths measured for new mounts, the humidity log initialed, the flagged flask and the lacquered box crated for the forensic conservator, with her custody tape on every seam, signed, photographed. The empty plinth where the Mabyong had stood, she left empty and lit. She had thought about rotating another piece into the space and decided against it. A hole in a collection is information. You don't dress information in someone else's clothes. Taehyun found her there at dusk, sleeves turned back, cotton gloves still on, updating the register by hand, because some records deserve ink. He stood at the end of the case line and watched her work for a while before she acknowledged him, and she let him, because being watched while she worked had stopped feeling like surveillance somewhere around Saturday, and she had decided not to examine when. The delegation landed in Seoul, he said. My grandfather called from the car. He asked whether the curator had reviewed her contract. The curator has redlined her contract, Sienna said, not looking up. Clause 9. The collection doesn't travel without the curator, and the curator doesn't fly cargo class with the crates. Tell your accountants to be offended in advance. They'll counter. They'll lose. He came down the gallery slowly, hands in his pockets, past the celadon cases, past the bunchong, and stopped at the small side table near the window, where 2 documents had lain since the afternoon before. The curatorship contract, now feathered with her flags and marginalia, and the other one, the registry form, still blank, the pen still lying across it at the exact angle an old man's hand had left it, untouched by the housekeeping staff for a full day because no one in the household had needed to be told. Taehyun looked at the form. Sienna kept writing in the register, but the pen slowed. He left the pen, Taehyun said. I noticed. You moved it. Now she looked up. He was studying the pen's angle the way she studied foot rings, and she realized he had photographed the original arrangement in his memory the day before, the same way she would have. The pen had migrated perhaps 2 inches since morning, and it had not migrated on its own. I picked it up, she said. I read the form, all of it, both sides, including the perjury statement, which is better drafted than most of what your family's lawyers produce. Then I put the pen back. Not where it was. No. She capped her own pen and set it down on the register, parallel to the spine, where I could find it. He crossed the last of the distance and stood close enough that she could see the day's weight on him, the calls to Seoul, the prosecutors, the weather of succession settling onto his shoulders like the overcoat he had finally, somewhere in the last week, begun to actually wear. He reached past her, not for her, for the registry form, and squared it gently to the table's edge, restoring order, an inch of steel patience in the gesture. Chon he said, quietly, almost to the paper, slowly. You taught the whole house that word this week. It can stand to apply to me. 8 weeks, she said. The jar and I certify together or not at all. You're pricing yourself against a national treasure. I'm pricing myself accurately. The look he gave her then was the one from the elevator, the first night, the assessing one, except that the assessment had long since closed, and what remained was a man rereading a document he already knew by heart because he liked the language. He inclined his head, a bow's smallest possible unit, and stepped back, and the registry form stayed on the table, blank and patient, a door left open by a grandfather and now propped by 2 people too disciplined to pretend they weren't both looking at it. They ate in the kitchen that night, not the dining room. The cook scandalized, and then, by the second course, converted. Halfway through the meal, Taehyun's phone lit with a Seoul number, and he answered it at the table, in Korean, and Sienna followed enough of it now to track the shape if not the words. Reports, dates, one long pause, while an old man on the other end said something that made Taehyun set down his chopsticks and sit straighter in a kitchen chair, alone, at night, an ocean away from the voice. When he hung up, he translated only one part. He asked whether the gallery lights were on. They're on a timer. I told him you leave the empty plinth lit. He picked the chopsticks back up. He said, good. A family should have to walk past what it lost. Do-yoon joined them for coffee and left after 1 cup, and the household breathed around them with the particular ease of a house that has been swept of rats. The letter came at 9. A courier envelope, heavy stock. The return address a defense firm on Lexington whose name Sienna recognized from the business pages, the kind of firm retained by men who are guilty and liquid. Do-yoon brought it up himself instead of sending it, which told her its weight before she touched it. Taehyun read the cover letter once and set it on the table without expression, turned so she could read it, which had become, in 5 days, the entire architecture of how they worked. Everything face up, everything turned toward the other. The language was lawyer's felt over lawyer's iron. Their client, Mr. Park Sang-hoon, wished to make no statement regarding pending matters. Their client wished, however, to extend an invitation, a single meeting, at a location of counsel's choosing, with one individual only, not Mr. CO, not the elders' representatives, not the district attorney, the appraiser. The final paragraph was 2 sentences, and the attorneys had plainly transcribed them verbatim from their client, because no lawyer would have written them, and no lawyer would have dared to cut them either. Sienna read them twice, the way she read everything, and felt the room's temperature drop a degree at a time, the gallery glass at her back, the empty lit plinth reflected faintly in the window against the dark. Ask her whether she has counted what left before she arrived. Then ask her whether she wants to know where the original went, because a copy in a case is a hole in the world, and I am the only man alive holding the map. Taehyun's hand settled flat on the table beside the letter. On the far side of the glass, 40 feet away, the empty plinth stood in its pool of light, waiting for a jar that was somewhere out in the world, in a crate, under someone else's paper. Sienna pulled the letter toward herself and read the 2 sentences a 3rd time. Then she set it down and walked the length of the room to the gallery glass, gloves off now, and stood in front of the empty plinth the way she had stood in front of the moon jar on the first morning, feet planted, weight even, a professional taking the measure of an object. Except the object was an absence, and the absence had just spoken to her through 2 lawyers and a courier. 61 objects on the schedule when I started counting, she said, to the glass, to him, to the room. But schedules only list what's supposed to be there. Nobody schedules what's already gone. She turned around. Your bonded conservators came twice a year for how long? 10 years? 12? Every visit supervised by the man who kept the books. If the Maebyong was his masterpiece, it wasn't his first. First attempts don't fool 7 elders. You practice before you touch the piece the patriarch prays to. You think there are others already out. I think a man facing prison just told us there's a map, and men like him don't bluff with their last card, they bluff with their first. She came back to the table and put one finger on the letter, on the word appraiser. He didn't ask for you because you'd bring the family. He didn't ask for the district attorney because the district attorney would bring a deal he doesn't like. He asked for me because I'm the only person in this who can stand in a room with an object and tell everyone whether the map is real. Taehyun looked at her for a long moment, and what moved behind the black of his eyes was arithmetic. The same arithmetic that had stopped a lobby cold 6 days ago. What it costs, what it buys, what it risks that cannot be bought back. He's right about one thing, she said. I never counted what left before I arrived. She looked up at Taehyun. Get me the meeting. Taehyun folded the lawyer's letter along its own crease and set it under the lamp, where the paper threw a small shadow across the desk. No, he said. That wasn't a question. It was a demand. Mine is also a demand. You do not sit in a room he chose. Sienna turned the letter so the letterhead faced him. He chose the room because he thinks the room is power. Let him keep it. He gave away something bigger in the second sentence. She tapped the line. He told us the original still exists. Men don't sell maps to burned houses. The lamp hummed. Somewhere below them, the building settled into its late-night sounds, elevators sighing in their shafts. Terms, Taehyun said at last. Daylight. His counsel books the conference room. Do-yoon books the floor. I carry nothing signed, nothing original. Copies only, and only if I choose to show them. And the district attorney's office knows the meeting exists before it happens. I'm their witness now. I don't do backrooms. And if he offers you the map for something you cannot give, then I'll find out what he thinks I can. She took the letter back. He asked for the appraiser. He's about to learn what that costs. The lawyers took 4 days to agree on a room. It came with a long walnut table, water in glass bottles, and a view of Lexington Avenue that nobody in the history of that firm had ever looked at. Do-yoon rode up in the same elevator as Sienna, stepped off one floor below, and became part of the hallway. Taehyun stayed in the car at the curb, which was as far from the table as he had agreed to be, and 2 blocks closer than his own counsel wanted. Sang-hoon was already seated when they showed her in. Custody had taken his cufflinks and his tie, and someone had let him keep the glasses. His hands lay flat on the table, bare. It was the first time she had seen them without the gloves, and they were ordinary hands, which somehow made everything worse. His attorney, a gray woman with a legal pad, sat against the wall. "Alone," Sang-hoon said, in English, to the attorney. That was the condition. The attorney looked at Sienna. Sienna nodded once. The door clicked shut behind her, and the room held 2 people and a table built for 16. "You came," he said. "You counted on it. You wrote that letter like a man who's watched me work." She sat, unhurried, and set her bag on the chair beside her, not the table. "So let's work. You said you're holding a map. Show me the edge of it. First a question." He adjusted the glasses with one finger. "Have you told the old man what left before you arrived?" "I've told him what I can prove. That's the only category I deal in." "Then he still believes he lost 1 jar." Sang-hoon almost smiled. 61 objects on your schedule, Miss Carter." "The schedule is a photograph of a single day. I had 11 years of days." Sienna let the sentence finish crossing the table before she answered. 6, she said. The finger on the glasses stopped. "Bonded conservators, twice a year, under your supervision. A substitution needs a window, and you only had 2 a year, and some years the elders visited and you had none. Your kiln needed months per piece. I put it between 5 and 7. Say 6. She poured water she did not intend to drink, and the small sound of it was the only thing in the room. "You didn't invite me here to tell me the number. You invited me because the number is worthless without locations, and the locations are worthless without paper, and I'm the only person alive who can make your inventory exist again in the legal world. So, what do you want for the map, Mr. Park?" He looked at his own hands for a moment. When he spoke, the accountant was gone from his voice, and something older sat in its place. "The kiln has 40 employees. My uncle is 73. He fires temple roof tiles and museum reproductions, and he believed every commission I sent him was licensed replica work, signed orders, replica contracts, all of it real paper as far as Kyungi could see. A breath. Your affidavit goes to prosecutors. Prosecutors go to Seoul. Seoul goes to the province. If the kiln is named, 40 people burn for my ledger. And the Maebyeong copy? Your uncle put his mark under the foot. Craftsmen don't sign crimes. Craftsmen sign their work. That is how you know he thought it was honest." He pushed a single sheet an inch toward her, his counsel's paper, blank except for 2 lines in his own hand, the warehouse and the ledger of 6, complete. In exchange, your report names, documents, accounts, and me. Not the kiln, not the family. Sienna read the 2 lines without touching the page. "A bonded storage facility in Newark. A unit number. Here is what I can do," she said. "My affidavit describes forged certificates and the man who commissioned them. Attribution of manufacture stays in the technical annex, and technical annexes name processes, not potters. That is standard practice and no favor to you. If Seoul comes asking, your uncle's replica contracts will defend him better than my silence would." She met his eyes. "But the ledger comes to me complete. All 6, with buyers where there are buyers. If I find a 7th, ever, in a catalog, in an auction record, in a customs file 10 years from now, the annex gets a 2nd edition. Do you understand the terms? You talk like a contract. I learned recently, from your family." The quiet that followed had a strange shape to it, almost like respect. Sang-hoon took the pen his counsel had left, wrote for 4 minutes without stopping, and turned the sheet around. 6 lines. 2 had names of overseas buyers beside them. 4 had the same word repeated in his neat accountant's column, warehoused. 4 never sold, Sienna said slowly. 4 never could. And there it was, the bitterness finally cracking the surface. Forged export seals move a piece across an ocean. They do not move it into a serious collection. Every buyer at that level makes one phone call, to a firm, to an appraiser, to someone exactly like you. For 11 years, I could copy everything except the signature that answers the phone. He took off the glasses, and without them, his eyes were just tired. I built a machine with one missing part, Ms. Carter. Then the part walked into my building and refused to sign. She stood and put the sheet in her bag. The inside pocket, the one with the zipper. The district attorney will hear that you cooperated, she said. That's not mercy. It's accounting. At the door, his voice caught her, softer than she had ever heard it. The old jar. When you open the crate, it's wrapped in cotton, then paper, then the blanket. The blanket stays with it. A pause. It came from the kiln house, my grandmother's. Sienna looked back at him, one hand on the door. Thieves wrapped things in bubble plastic. Family wrapped things in blankets. She carried that all the way down in the elevator and said nothing to anyone. The warrant took 2 days because Hyacinth Holdings was already a name in a criminal file, and judges signed faster the second time. Thursday morning, under a sky washed clean by last week's storm, 3 cars pulled into a bonded warehouse in Newark. 1 from the district attorney's office, 1 carrying Do-yoon and 2 of his men, and 1 carrying Sienna Carter and Seo Tae-hyun, who had not spoken since the bridge. Unit 4U-117 held 5 crates on steel racks, each stenciled with a lot number and nothing else. The DA's investigator broke the seals and stepped back, because everyone in that concrete room understood whose hands came next. Sienna put on the white gloves. The first 4 crates gave up a bronze incense burner, a pair of buncheon ritual vessels, and an 8-panel document screen. The 4 warehoused lines of the ledger, each one matching, each one photographed against Song-hoon's neat column. She worked without hurry, calling numbers to the investigator, and the room learned to be quiet around her the way rooms did. The 5th crate was larger, cotton, then paper, then a blanket, wool, faded indigo, mended in one corner with stitches that didn't match. She folded it back the way you fold something that belongs to somebody. The Maebyeong stood in its nest of cotton like it had been waiting out a war, which, in a sense, it had. She lifted it in both hands, and the weight told her first, the honest, uneven heft of hand-wedged clay. Under the raking light, the crackle wandered, hesitated, doubled back, the way glaze breaks when it cools at the speed of weather instead of the speed of a schedule. The inlaid cranes sat beneath the surface, not on it. She turned it over. Under the foot, nothing. No mark, no circle, no signature. 12th century potters had not needed one. Aigu, she breathed, the word arriving from nowhere she could name, in a voice that wasn't quite her own working voice. Tae-hyun crossed the concrete floor and stopped an arm's length away. He looked at the jar the way other men look at photographs of the dead come back walking. Your grandfather's grandmother carried this 11 days, Sienna said quietly. It's real, Tae-hyun. It never left the country. It never even left New Jersey. She set it into its cradle, and only then did her hands allow themselves the smallest tremor, the one she'd been holding off since the seals broke. Call Seoul, wake him up. Some phone calls are worth the hour. He made the call from the loading dock, in Korean, facing the river. Sienna catalogued the incense burner and pretended the conversation wasn't reaching her, and mostly it wasn't, until the end, when Tae-hyun's voice dropped and steadied around a single sentence, and across 7,000 miles, an old man was silent for so long that even the investigator glanced up. Then Junpyo said something brief, and Tae-hyun laughed, one short breath of it, the first she had ever heard from him. and hung up. He stood at the edge of the dock a moment longer, phone loose in his hand, watching a container ship push upriver, as if it were carrying something of his. When he came back inside, some weight he had worn so long it had stopped being visible was gone from his shoulders, and Sienna understood that she had just watched a man finish coming home from an exile that had never appeared on any itinerary. What did he say? He said, Taehyun translated, "Tell the curator the family will now have to walk past what it found." The weeks after that moved the way paper moves, slowly, and then all at once. The two pieces sold overseas became letters between governments, recovery claims filed under the Cultural Property Conventions, a process Sienna's ledger and Sang-hoon's cooperation shortened from decades to seasons. The accountants returned the curatorship contract with Clause 9 intact, and a note that read like surrender. The forensic conservator's report came back on the bunchong flask and the lacquered box, both staged for substitution, both originals, both back behind conservation glass by the end of the month. Sang-hoon pleaded guilty on a gray Tuesday, quietly, to a courtroom holding no one from the family, because the family's verdict had already been rendered in ink and needed no second reading. The technical annex, as promised, named processes and not potters. The indigo blanket, which no evidence list had a category for, went back to Gyeonggi Province, in a box addressed in Sienna's hand, with no note, because some returns explain themselves. On a Thursday morning in the 6th week, Sienna signed the Brightwater Visitors book and found her grandmother sitting up with the good light on her, a fresh church program in her lap. This Sundays, for once, the cousin's name moved up to a solo. Sienna told her about the jar in Newark, in the outlines the old woman needed and none of the ones she didn't. Something precious had been taken from a family, and Sienna had counted it back into the world. Her grandmother listened with her curved finger tapping the blanket, slow as a metronome. "And they're paying you to keep counting. Every month, the first of the month can ring all at once now." The tap stopped. The old eyes, cataract soft and missing nothing, went to Sienna's bare hand and stayed there. "You pulled at it gently, like I told you. So what's the thing made of?" Sienna looked out the window, her salary kept, at the strip of sky her grandmother had chosen over every other view in the building, and gave the only appraisal she had left. "Something that holds," she said. The Maebyeong went home on a Friday. Sienna supervised the crate through the service corridor herself, under the new rule, passed the vendor log with its preserved page, and set the jar on the plinth that had stood empty and lit for 5 weeks. The copy did not go to a landfill and did not go to a courtroom shelf. On her recommendation and the patriarch's written approval, it went into the steel vault, on a stand beside 60 years of paper, with a card in her handwriting, attributed Gyeonggi Province, 1974 to 2025, acquired at the cost of almost everything. Junpyo telephoned the night the original was installed and asked to be held up to the glass. Taehyun carried the phone down the gallery like a lantern. The old man looked for a long time through the camera at the jar his grandmother had carried, and what he finally said, he said to Sienna. "A family that loses its objects begins to forget what it promised," he said. "You have made my house remember. The registry in Seoul has a page waiting for the woman who did that, whenever there is a name to enter on it." He hung up before she could decide whether that was a blessing or a deadline. With that man, she was learning, it was always both. The Ministry of Culture's answer arrived in the 7th week, in a cream envelope with a seal that bit deepest at the center, the way genuine seals do. 3 export certificates from March 1962 were confirmed forgeries, the moon jars among them, and enclosed was what the moon jar had lacked for 63 years. A verified duplicate record from the original ministry files, 12 petals, correct in every particular, with a cover letter inviting the appraiser of record to complete her certification. Sienna read it twice at the long desk, the way she read everything that mattered, and then she carried her tablet down to the gallery, where the light was good and the company was better. The draft report was still there, where it had lived since a Thursday night that felt like another woman's life. Resalva intact, signature line blank. She connected the ministry record, appended the verification chain, and read her own careful words one last time. Export documentation discrepancy. Verification required prior to certification. Verification, it turned out, had required a marriage, a war, and 8 weeks. She signed. The tablet chimed softly as the certification filed, and a $3.1 million jar 40 floors below became, at last, exactly what it had always been. Taehyun stood at the end of the gallery, near the small table where 2 documents had waited since the delegation flew home. He had made no sound arriving. She had learned to feel him anyway. "The jar is certified," she said, not turning around. "Papers clean, chains whole. It's the real thing, and now the world can prove it." "And the terms were," he said, "the jar and you, together or not at all." "You remember terms?" "I am told it runs in the family." She crossed the gallery to the table. The marriage register lay where Junpyo had left it, the pen still in its diagonal, though both of them knew the pen had been moved and moved back, and neither of them had ever said so out loud. Beside it, her curatorship contract, executed weeks ago, her signature already dry on that one. The work had never been the question. Sienna picked up the pen, turned it once in her fingers, the way she tested the balance of a tool before trusting it. "I read this form front to back," she said. "There's a perjury statement at the bottom. Everything above the line has to be true when you sign it. Not convenient, not strategic. True." She looked up at him. 8 weeks ago, you needed a wife the way a man needs an alibi. That was the contract, and I performed it, and it's over. The delegation is gone. The succession is settled. The debt from the lobby, paid, both directions. So before there's ink anywhere near this page, I need the answer to one question, and family rules apply. "No one lies to the elders," Taehyun said. "You're not talking to an elder." "No." He came around the table, slowly, and stopped where she could see everything his face was doing, which for the first time since she had met him was all of it. "I am talking to the curator of everything my family could not afford to lose. Ask, why is this paper still on this table?" The gallery held its breath, 60 objects listening from behind glass. "Because my grandfather does not leave papers where he pleases," Taehyun said. "He leaves them where they are true, and he saw it before I said it, and you saw it before he did, and I have been the last to say every true thing in this house since a woman grabbed my sleeve and called me her husband." His hand came up and closed, gently, around the hand that held the pen. She was lying then. I am not lying now. "Sienna Carter, the accounts are settled and nothing binds you. Stay anyway. Marry me on paper a clerk can file." "That," she said, and her voice had gone soft as the inside of a lining, "is the least romantic proposal in the history of this city. You certify objects. I am giving you a provenance." "Jinja," she whispered, and laughed, once, helplessly, the word coming out wrapped in everything she felt. Okay, Mr. Seo." Witness. Do-yoon appeared from the end of the gallery, where he had absolutely not been standing for 10 minutes, holding the reading glasses he never admitted to needing. He witnessed the way he did everything, precisely, silently, and with the smallest bow in the direction of the bride. She signed her name below the perjury statement, every letter of it true. Taehyun signed beneath her, and his hand was not entirely steady, and she noticed, and filed it away in her private schedule of authentic things. Do-yoon signed last, blotted the page with archivist's care, and said, in English, the longest sentence she had ever heard him volunteer, "I will file it myself in the morning. Paper this important does not ride in a courier bag. He left them there. The gallery lights ticked down to their evening setting, 50 lux, gentle as candlelight, and the Mabyong stood on its plinth in the glow. 12th century, 4 pounds of clay and glaze and 11 days of an old woman's walking. Home. Taehyun looked at the register a long moment. 8 weeks ago you wrote a reservation instead of a signature, he said. Discrepancy in the documentation, verification required. I stand by my methods. Sienna set down the pen and let him pull her in, unhurried. The platinum band, retrieved from a place card, resized for no one, hers, warm now on her hand between them. Everything verified. And the finding? She kissed him first this time, in the light, with the whole collection watching, and gave her professional opinion against his mouth. Authentic, she said. It's always the paper. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, my loves, have you ever been sent through the service door of a place your own skill was holding up, and kept your chin level anyway? Have you ever refused to sign your name to a lie, even with the rent due and everything to lose? Mark my words. The person they push through the back door is often the only one carrying the truth. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, loyalty, and karma, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.